We live in a world of constant chatter. Every moment, someone is announcing their plans, posting their opinions, or revealing pieces of themselves to an audience that may not even be listening. Social media feeds overflow with confessions, arguments, and endless updates. Meetings are filled with people desperate to speak, desperate to be heard, even if they have nothing meaningful to say. Silence, it seems, has become unbearable. We rush to fill every quiet moment with noise, as if stillness itself has become suspicious. But here lies a paradox. The more people speak, the less power their words carry. The more they reveal, the more predictable and vulnerable they become. Niccolò Machiavelli, the infamous thinker often remembered only for his ruthless realism, understood this better than most. While the world around him was full of scheming politicians and reckless talkers, he saw silence not as weakness, but as a weapon. He recognized that the person who speaks least often controls the conversation, and the person who holds back gains the advantage others carelessly throw away. In his time, careless words could cost a man his reputation, his fortune, even his life. Today, the consequences may look different, but the principle is the same. When you reveal too much, when you share before you must, you give others the power to predict you, manipulate you, or undermine you. Every unnecessary word becomes a thread that can be pulled. Every explanation becomes a chain that binds you to promises you may no longer wish to keep. Silence, on the other hand, protects. Silence preserves freedom. Silence creates an aura of strength that speech often destroys. And that is what this video is about. Not silence as passivity, but silence as power. Not silence as retreat, but silence as strategy. Because in a world that demands constant expression, the person who masters restraint doesn't just survive the noise, they rise above it. They shut up and they win. Title card fades in, shut up and win. Machiavelli's strategy of silence. In Machiavelli's world, speech was dangerous. A careless word spoken to the wrong ear could mean exile or even execution. He understood that language carried weight, and that those who spoke too freely often sealed their own fate. And while today we do not live under the constant threat of execution for what we say, we still pay a price for careless speech. Only now, the costs are quieter, subtler, but no less destructive. Think about it. Every time you reveal your intentions too early, you give others a weapon against you. A competitor who hears your plans can anticipate your moves. A colleague who overhears your doubts can use them to undermine your authority. A critic who listens to your explanations can twist your words into evidence of weakness. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago, writing, "Men judge more by the eyes than by the hands, for everyone can see, but few can feel." When you speak endlessly, you hand the world something visible to judge. When you remain silent, you withhold the truth of what lies within. There are 3 hidden costs to excessive speech. The first is commitment. Once you declare something, your goals, your intentions, your opinions, you bind yourself to it in the eyes of others. If you change your mind later, you look inconsistent, even untrustworthy. But if you had stayed silent, you would have preserved your freedom. Silence allows you to adapt without apology. The second cost is exposure. Every word reveals something about how you think, your reasoning, your fears, even your blind spots. And the more you reveal, the easier it becomes for others to predict or manipulate you. Just as Machiavelli said, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. In the same way, the first method for estimating someone's capacity is to simply listen to how much they give away. The third cost is erosion of authority. Power depends on distance. It depends on mystery. The leader who speaks constantly, explaining every detail, justifying every decision, becomes ordinary. And the ordinary cannot command the same respect as the extraordinary. Machiavelli himself was blunt. It is far safer to be feared than loved. And fear, or at least respect, requires silence. It requires space. The leader who responds to every criticism seems insecure. The one who remains silent appears unshakable. You don't have to look far to see this in action. In modern workplaces, the colleague who comments on everything eventually loses weight. Their words blend into the noise. On social media, the person who shares every detail of their life becomes predictable, not inspiring. In negotiations, the one who nervously fills every silence with explanations or concessions surrenders their leverage. In politics, the leader who tries to answer every attack diminishes themselves in the process. Machiavelli would see this as a tragic mistake, a voluntary surrender of power. He would argue that unnecessary speech is not a sign of authenticity, but of poor strategy. It is a gift to others, an endless stream of information they can use against you, given without getting anything in return. And this is where his wisdom still cuts deeply into our modern lives. We have been trained to equate constant communication with honesty, to confuse disclosure with strength. But the truth is simpler. Every word you speak is a move on the chessboard. Every phrase is a piece exposed. And those who never learn when to hold their tongue end up losing pieces long before the game is done. The camera lingers on a quiet figure in a meeting, sitting still, listening as others talk over one another. Then, slowly, the narrator's voice lowers, deliberate and sharp. The cost of speech is not always visible. It doesn't announce itself. But it is there, in every commitment you cannot break, every vulnerability you accidentally expose, every ounce of respect you lose with needless words. And those who fail to master silence will always be ruled by those who do. Silence is not a void. It is not simply the absence of words. In Machiavelli's world, silence was a deliberate strategy, a weapon to be sharpened and used with precision. He understood that there are different kinds of silence, each serving a different purpose. To master silence is not to retreat from communication altogether, but to know which silence to use and when. There are three primary forms of strategic silence. The first is information-gathering silence. The second is authority-building silence. And the third is ambiguity-preserving silence. Together, they form a toolkit that can shift the balance of power in any setting, whether in politics, in business, or in our personal lives. Let's begin with the first, information-gathering silence. Machiavelli wrote, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." The fool rushes to speak, eager to make their position known, desperate to impress or defend themselves. But the wise man stays silent at first. He waits. He observes. While others reveal their thoughts, their intentions, and their weaknesses, he gathers intelligence without offering anything in return. You can see this principle in negotiations. The first person to speak usually loses. They reveal their position too early, narrowing their room for maneuver. In relationships, it is often the listener, the one who lets silence do the work, who understands the dynamics more deeply than the talker. And in competitive situations, the person who broadcasts their strategy before executing it often underperforms compared to the one who keeps their plan hidden. Silence creates asymmetry. It allows you to collect while others squander. The second type is authority-building silence. Machiavelli warned that power depends not only on force, but on perception. And perception can be shaped by what you choose not to say. A leader who comments on every minor issue begins to sound desperate. Their words lose weight because they are too frequent. But a leader who speaks rarely, and only when necessary, commands attention every time they open their mouth. Consider the contrast: the anxious junior executive who explains at length versus the CEO who delivers a single, decisive statement. The insecure friend who justifies every decision versus the confident one who simply acts. In each case, silence magnifies authority because people instinctively assign more value to what is scarce. The more selective you are with your words, the more seriously others will take them. Silence here is not absence, it is elevation. It transforms ordinary words into extraordinary ones. The third form is ambiguity-preserving silence. Machiavelli, who was no stranger to the shifting tides of politics, knew that committing too clearly, too early, often destroys flexibility. He observed, since it is difficult to join them together, it is safer to be feared than loved when one of the two must be lacking. But this principle extends beyond fear and love. It applies to every area where clarity might trap you. Ambiguity-preserving silence allows multiple interpretations to exist at once. When you refuse to explain yourself fully, others project their own hopes and fears onto your position. Politicians use this constantly. They make statements vague enough that different audiences hear what they want to hear. Negotiators use it by avoiding fixed positions, leaving space for more favorable deals. Leaders use it by speaking in broad vision rather than binding themselves to rigid details. This is not about deception. It is about freedom. It is about refusing to limit yourself by locking into one meaning one promise, one path. Strategic silence maintains room for movement, while compulsive speech narrows it. Visual. 3 images cycle quickly. First, a negotiator sitting silently across a table. Second, a leader holding back while others argue. Third, a politician whose vague words inspire both sides of a divided crowd. These 3 forms of silence, information gathering, authority building, and ambiguity preserving, are not about being quiet for the sake of quiet. They are about control. Each type is a lever you can pull depending on what the situation demands. And the one who knows how to pull them, the one who resists the urge to overshare, gains an advantage that constant talkers will never understand. Music swells. The screen darkens slightly as the narrator pauses. So the question is not whether you should speak or stay silent. The question is, which silence will serve you best in this moment? Silence does not only protect you strategically, it also exerts a powerful psychological effect. It shapes the way people see you, how they respond to you, and even what they reveal about themselves. Machiavelli may not have had the vocabulary of modern psychology, but he understood this truth intuitively. Silence can succeed where persuasion fails. The first way silence works is through projection. Human beings cannot stand in empty space in communication. When a pause stretches too long, when silence lingers, our minds instinctively rush to fill the void. And we often fill it not with truth, but with our own fears, our hopes, and our assumptions. This is why silence is so revealing. The negotiator who sits quietly at the table forces the other side to start talking, often confessing weaknesses or offering concessions just to ease the discomfort. The interrogator who waits in silence gets more from a subject than by pressing them with questions. Even in relationships, when you respond to anger or accusations with silence, the other person often reveals more than they intended because they cannot bear the weight of your stillness. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions." But silence itself can act like deception without ever telling a lie. People project their own reality onto your silence, and in that moment, you learn more about them than they learn about you. The second psychological effect is dominance. In every interaction, there is a subtle struggle for power. Who leads the conversation? Who sets the pace? Who frames the reality? The one who talks constantly is unconsciously asking for validation. Do you understand me? Do you agree with me? Do you see my point? The one who stays silent projects no such need. They appear above the struggle. They look like the judge rather than the petitioner. Think of a job interview. The nervous candidate talks endlessly about themselves, trying to impress. But the candidate who asks questions, who listens, who allows silence to stretch without rushing to fill it, they often seem more confident, more in control. Or consider a business meeting. The quiet person, who speaks rarely but deliberately, commands more attention than the one who comments on every detail. Silence flips the dynamic. It makes others feel as though they are performing for you. Machiavelli understood this principle in his own time. He argued it was safer to be feared than loved. And while silence does not always create fear, it does create distance. And distance, in turn, commands respect. The one who holds their tongue holds the higher ground. The third psychological effect of silence is mystique. What is hidden is always more powerful than what is fully revealed. People judge based on appearances, not realities. And when they cannot fully see your intentions, when they cannot entirely grasp your reasoning, they imagine you to be more capable, more intelligent, even more dangerous than you may actually be. Leaders who reveal everything about their decision-making strip themselves of this mystique. They reduce themselves to equals, no longer above the crowd. But the leader who shares only conclusions, while keeping their thought process private, creates an aura of authority. Their decisions seem to emerge from a depth others cannot quite reach. Their silence amplifies their presence. This is why the quiet figure in any group often commands attention without trying. People lean toward them, wonder what they are thinking, and take their eventual words more seriously. The mystery elevates them. As Machiavelli observed, men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. What is seen on the surface matters more than what lies beneath. And silence ensures that what lies beneath remains hidden, magnified by imagination. Visual, a boardroom. A heated debate among executives. At the end of the table, one person remains silent, simply listening. When they finally speak, the room falls silent. Their words land harder, not because they are louder, but because they are rarer. Silence is not passive. It is active. It shapes how others see you, how they respond to you, and what they reveal. It is projection, it is dominance, it is mystique. And once you understand these psychological powers, you begin to see why Machiavelli's silence was never weakness. It was control. Modern culture tells us, be transparent, be authentic, share everything. We're told to post our plans online, to speak openly about our fears, to let others see the unfiltered truth. Companies promise total transparency. Leaders livestream their decision-making. Individuals spill their inner struggles across social media in the name of authenticity. But Machiavelli would see this very differently. He would call it a trap. He understood that every time you reveal too much, you bind yourself. He wrote, "The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present." What he meant was simple. What you reveal today can easily become a chain tomorrow. A declaration that feels good in the moment can restrict you in the future, locking you into commitments that no longer serve your interests. Transparency, in this sense, is a kind of self-imposed cage. You hand over information, sometimes casually, sometimes emotionally, and once it is out, you cannot take it back. You have reduced your flexibility. You have armed others with knowledge they can use against you. Consider how this plays out in business. A startup announces a product before it is ready, eager to seem innovative. Competitors race ahead and beat them to market. Or a company publishes every internal debate in the name of openness, only to find investors and customers questioning their competence. What was meant as authenticity becomes a liability. In personal relationships, the same trap appears. We are taught to confess everything, to speak every thought and fear as soon as it arises. But disclosure is not always strength. It can make you predictable. It can turn intimacy into vulnerability. It can arm the wrong person with knowledge that one day cuts against you. Machiavelli would not call this authenticity. He would call it strategic malpractice. In politics, the transparency trap is even more visible. Leaders who reveal too much too early, detailing every policy, explaining every tactic, give their rivals the tools to counter them. The public may praise them for honesty, but power slowly slips through their fingers. Meanwhile, the leader who withholds, who reveals only what is useful, maintains flexibility and leverage. The truth is that transparency is not always virtue. In Machiavelli's world, it was often foolishness. He knew that power requires discretion and that honesty is valuable only when it serves a purpose. He wrote, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." In our time, this might be rephrased. Never attempt to win by unnecessary disclosure what can be won by silence. And yet, our culture has flipped this wisdom upside down. We are taught that silence is suspicious, that restraint is weakness. If you don't explain yourself, people assume you are hiding something. If you don't share, they say you are not authentic. But the reality is, the loudest voices are often the most insecure. The most open are often the most manipulable. And the most transparent are often the most ordinary. Machiavelli understood that power thrives not in constant disclosure, but in selective revelation. The point is not to lie. The point is not to deceive. The point is to understand that your words should serve your objectives, not simply your emotions. To share what strengthens you, not what weakens you. To hold back what gives others advantage, and to reveal only what draws them closer to your orbit. Visual, a leader standing before a crowd. Instead of explaining every detail, they speak only of vision, broad, inspiring, but vague. The audience fills in the blanks with their own hopes. Each person leaves thinking the leader spoke directly to them. This is the power of avoiding the transparency trap. It is not secrecy for its own sake. It is strategy. It is discipline. It is understanding that silence, far from being weakness, is often the strongest form of communication you have. The music drops lower. The narrator's voice slows, steady, deliberate. In the end, those who overshare give away their power. They reveal their positions, their weaknesses, their limits. But those who resist, those who remain silent until it serves them, those are the ones who win. So far, we've seen why Machiavelli valued silence and how it shapes perception. But how do you actually practice it? How can you take these ideas from theory and use them in your daily life, at work, in relationships, in moments of conflict. The first discipline is information asymmetry, learning before you reveal. Machiavelli understood that power comes from knowing more than others while saying less. Before you state your opinion in a meeting, pause. Ask questions instead of rushing to answer. Let others reveal what they think, what they fear, and what they want. In negotiations, this is invaluable. The more you know about the other side's true needs, the stronger your position becomes. But if you rush to speak first, if you declare your position before you understand theirs, you give away leverage. Try this. In your next conversation, hold back just a little longer. Let others speak first. Let silence stretch a few seconds more than feels comfortable. You'll be surprised at what people reveal when you give them space. The second discipline is strategic ambiguity, preserving flexibility by avoiding unnecessary specificity. This doesn't mean being dishonest. It means refusing to trap yourself with premature detail. Machiavelli advised, a prince should therefore be very slow to believe and very slow to act. His point was that restraint preserves freedom. In leadership, this might look like outlining a vision, where you want to go, without locking yourself into rigid steps you may later abandon. In personal relationships, it might mean expressing commitment to shared goals, while leaving room for different paths to reach them. In competition, it means keeping your strategy private until it matters most. Think of ambiguity as keeping multiple doors open. Speech closes doors. Silence keeps them ajar. The third discipline is comfort with silence itself. Most people cannot stand it. The moment a pause appears in conversation, they rush to fill it, often revealing more than they intend or weakening their position. But if you can learn to sit with silence, to let it work for you, you hold an advantage most people never master. In negotiations, this means, after you make your offer, stop talking. Don't qualify it. Don't soften it. Let the silence sit. The other side will often break first, filling the space with concessions. In conflict, this means listening fully before responding, not interrupting, not defending yourself too quickly. And in leadership, it means delivering decisions without unnecessary explanations, trusting the decision to stand on its own. These three disciplines, information asymmetry, strategic ambiguity, and comfort with silence, are not easy. They go against everything we've been trained to do in a noisy culture. We are told to explain ourselves, to justify, to share. But power does not belong to the one who speaks the most. It belongs to the one who speaks the least, but says the most when they finally do. Visual, a montage, an executive staying quiet as others rush to speak, a negotiator calmly waiting as the silence forces concessions, a leader speaking briefly and decisively, their words landing with weight. Machiavelli would remind us, silence is not an action. It is discipline. It is the art of restraint. It is the refusal to give away more than you must. In a world of compulsive speech, silence is not emptiness. It is power. The music swells slightly as the narrator pauses. So ask yourself, do you control your words, or do your words control you? Machiavelli's teaching was never about absolute silence. He did not believe in muteness, in hiding forever behind stillness. His strategy was more subtle, more dangerous, and far more effective. It was about speaking only when speech served your purpose better than silence. This is what we might call the strategic whisper. The true master of silence knows that words, when rare, carry immense weight. If you are always speaking, your words become cheap. But if you hold them back, if you choose them carefully, release them sparingly, they strike with greater force. The same phrase that would vanish in the noise of constant chatter becomes unforgettable when spoken after long silence. Think about the difference between the nervous speaker and the composed leader. The nervous one fills every gap with words, as if silence itself will expose them. The composed one lets silence breathe, then speaks a single sentence that settles the room. The audience remembers not because of the length of their speech, but because of the discipline behind it. Machiavelli wrote, "The vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances, and what is more striking in appearance than the person who seems to know something others do not? The one who speaks less, who reveals only fragments, creates an aura of mystery. Their silence suggests depth. Their rare words suggest significance. And so, when they finally do speak, people lean in. They listen. They remember. This is the paradox of the strategic whisper. Silence gives words their power. You can see this in every field. In business, The executive who speaks only at critical moments commands more authority than the one who comments on every detail. In negotiation, the side that waits silently, then delivers one firm statement, often secures more than the side that argues endlessly. In personal life, the friend or partner who listens deeply and then offers one well-timed observation often influences more than the one who talks constantly. The strategic whisper is not about being quiet forever. It is about creating contrast. A symphony is not powerful because of sound alone. It is powerful because of the spaces between the notes. Silence makes the sound meaningful. In the same way, your silence makes your words stronger. Visual, a montage of contrasts. Someone nervously rambling versus another who waits, then delivers a calm, decisive phrase. A negotiator leaning back silently versus one who over-explains. A leader delivering a single sharp line that silences a room. This discipline is rare in today's culture. We are surrounded by people broadcasting constantly, posting every thought, explaining every action. But because everyone else is always speaking, the one who withholds stands out. Their silence sets them apart. Their words command attention precisely because they are few. Machiavelli understood this irony. The masters of silence are rarely celebrated because they achieve their goals without drawing attention to their methods. They win not with noise, but with restraint. And that is why the strategic whisper is so dangerous. It does not announce itself. It does not brag. It does not demand recognition. It simply shapes reality, quietly, decisively, while others exhaust themselves in endless talk. The camera lingers on a final image, a leader walking away from a press conference, having said only a single sentence. Reporters shout questions, but the leader says nothing more. The silence itself becomes the story. This is the lesson of the strategic whisper: speak less and be heard more. In the end, silence is not weakness. It is not absence. It is power. Machiavelli understood that those who reveal less control more, that those who hold back keep their freedom, that those who know when to remain silent win while others are still talking about winning. Visual shifts to Machiavelli's words on screen. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. To master silence is to master yourself. To let your actions speak louder than your explanations. To choose words as weapons, not as noise. So in your next meeting, in your next negotiation, in your next moment of conflict, remember, silence can be your greatest strength. Title fades in, shut up and win.